Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast, where we aim to inspire and motivate people to never give up on themselves or their dreams. We will chat with highly successful people from all walks of life and discuss what motivates and drives them to successfully attack life head on and never give up. Welcome to episode number 43 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is self-improvement. Our quote of the day comes to us from Anthony J. D'Angelo. Become addicted to consistent and never-ending self-improvement. Today marks day 17 of the 21-day No Quit Living challenge. We welcome you to participate in this challenge where we invite you to think big and identify your one goal that you want to accomplish over these next 21 days. Please head over to our No Quit Living Facebook page for all the details and our daily videos. You can find us at facebook.com/NoQuitLiving. We hope to see you there. I think you will really enjoy today's interview. Our guest delivers some great information when it comes to mental modeling and self-improvement. For those that have been following No Quit Living, we are all about and welcome everyone to join our self-improvement movement. Our guest today did just that, but he does it in such a fun and informative way. I think you are in for a treat. With that said, I would like to introduce Mark Organ. Mark, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Thrilled to be here. Thanks.
So the first question we ask everybody is, are you ready to make it happen today?
We are absolutely ready to make it happen. That is a great question. And I am feeling optimistic.
Awesome. That's the only way to be. So the number one objective of our podcast is to motivate and inspire our listeners. And I wanted to ask if you either had a story about perseverance or perhaps a challenging time that tested you and you didn't quit.
Yeah, I've had a lot of those actually in my career, and I'm fortunate to get my start in business doing door-to-door sales, and that's a great way to build perseverance. It's not an easy way to make a living. It was actually a house painting company, and this is when I was a teenager, so I'm like 17, 18 years old. It's interesting. Listeners probably know of College Pro, which is not actually kind of ended up working with. So there's another company which nobody will ever have heard of called Metro Pro, which is a total knockoff of College Pro, which basically hires students to build little businesses around house painting. Then I found out I had to pay 25% back to the company, and I don't think they did very much for it. They certainly didn't have much of a brand. So I went into business for myself instead of being a franchisee for Metro Pro. I created a company called Organized Painting Services, which is hilarious for anyone who knows me because I'm not very organized, but my last name is Organ. So, of course, the company is organized because I'm running it. But anyway, one of the things that I learned the hard way is that by knocking on doors in the rain, you can get better results. It's not the most comfortable thing, but people take a little bit of pity, and so I ended up generating more opportunities to sell house painting services that way. So that's really how I got my start, and then I learned how to program computers. And since I had this experience in knocking on doors, I built a software company, and I had the same distribution model. So I would go to office towers in downtown Toronto where I live and start at the top of the building and work my way down and literally knock on doors and ask them if they need any software built. And so learning how to deal with that rejection, I think has been really helpful for me in my career. I mean, how to deal with rejection, just every day, just got to get back up and you got to keep working at it. And every time someone tells you no, you're actually getting that much closer to getting to results and success. So I guess fast forward to the last 15 years of my life where I've been building more scaled up businesses. So not selling software door to door or house painting services, but selling much larger, more significant pieces of software. The Last company that I founded, Eloqua, ended up going public and was sold for almost $1 billion to Oracle, so it had some success. But along the way, we almost went bankrupt 4 times. One time was literally within a few days of not being able to make payroll forever. Literally sold everything I had to keep the business afloat. So have some experience with this, and pretty amazing stories there. Probably the one that really sticks out was we were probably only about it was about three and a half months, I think, before we were absolutely out of money, and I was down to my last dollar personally. So we weren't going to have another lease on life. And we're based in Toronto, and I one day see this press release that comes out from my biggest competitor, based in Silicon Valley, who raised almost $50 million. And it was a press release announcing their newest customer win for Manitoba Telecom in Winnipeg. And like, you just can't get any more Canadian than Manitoba Telecom. And so this is the most infuriating thing ever. I mean, here we we're like almost dead, and we see this press release that comes from our very rich competitor announcing this customer win practically in our backyard. And so I wrote an email to the people who are listed in the press release and saying, look, I know you're happy with these jokers in California, but we're right in your backyard and we can do a much better job. At least give us a shot, at least hear what we have to say. And so they said, okay, fine, we'll hear what you have to say. And so in the middle of winter, we flew to Winnipeg, which is the worst place in the world you ever want to be in February. But anyway, and it turns out they actually weren't that happy with our competitor, and they liked our product. And we actually got the deal 2 weeks later, and it kicked off a series of very positive events that saved our company and ended up, allowing us to grow. That other company that raised so much money, we actually put them out of business in less than a year because we had a better product and we were more aggressive in terms of our ability to sell. And it was a close call. We were really down to our last dollar at that point.
Well, that's quite a story. I want to touch on one thing you said. You mentioned almost filing for bankruptcy 4 times and then ended up selling to Oracle for almost $1 billion. I got to ask you, but many people have almost encountered, or businesses, bankruptcy once, but how did you overcome the 4 times, and what was it during your mindset during those tough times that kept you going?
Part of it was, it's a great question in terms of mindset. Honestly, we really didn't have much choice. Like, we did have to execute. Not only did we have employees that were dependent on us, but a number of the founders and the early management team had also put in money. Our families put in money, sometimes significant amount of money that probably they shouldn't have done, or their financial planners certainly would not have liked that if they heard about it. And so we had an obligation to do everything possible. So at least we could say that we did literally everything we possibly could to have been successful. So I think that was a pretty positive mindset, right? So let us at least be proud of this moment. If we end up kicking the bucket, let us at least be proud that we did everything we could. And so that was a good way to think. I think another thing, and I was lucky enough to have some really smart advisors around me. It wasn't just me alone. We had some very wise people, former or current entrepreneurs who had built businesses before, and there's this great spirit, at least here in Toronto, probably a lot of other places, where entrepreneurs really do give back to the next generation, or pay it forward, or whatever the word is. And one of the things that they often encourage me to do is focus on your journey. Focus on the fact that you are getting better. You are getting better every month. And keep working on delivering high quality of activity and a lot of activity. Because if every month you're producing more activity and the activity is better quality and you're learning, eventually you're going to win. And in terms of the effect of that on psychology, it's powerful, right? Because then you're focusing on your day by day step. You're like, I'm better than I am yesterday. and I'll be better again tomorrow. It's that story of, I think his name, the story of Milos. It's a Greek legend of, a farmer who every day, picked up a calf, right? And as the calf ate, right, every day that calf gets bigger and bigger. And when the time came for the Olympics, Milos could lift an entire bull over his head, right? Because every day he was walking around with this calf that got heavier and heavier. And so I think this process of getting better a little bit every day and sort of focusing on that is a great way to not think so much about the fact that you've got this yawning abyss in front of you.
You touched on some really interesting things, and you talked about advisors, and I think that can go hand in hand with something we talk about quite often, which is mentors. And obviously during those tough times, you had some good people in your corner, but you just mentioned something that I think is really important, is focus on the journey, and every month and every day focus on the activity, and eventually you're going to win. And you touched on one piece that I could not agree more with, is you always want to be better today than you were yesterday. You can't focus on tomorrow and you can't focus on yesterday, but you can focus on today, trying to make today better than yesterday. So I think that all together is something which obviously helped you get to the point where dealing with potentially filing for bankruptcy 4 times and then selling for almost $1 billion. So I think you touched on a lot of things, but the thing that stood out to me was about what you mentioned, is focusing on the activity and the right type of activity, and eventually you're going to win. Is that something that you've always done, or is that something that you've learned over the years, or maybe a combination of both?
Yeah, I think it started, that's why I started with a story of door-to-door sales, which actually I have not told that story in like a long time. It's not something to talk about. It's something that happened in starting in my teenage years in terms of how I learned to make money. So the only way to make money selling things door to door is by having greater activity and greater quality of activity. So I think it started there, and then again, I also had a really wise advisor who had experience in sales consulting. So you get a lot of this, and the sales discipline really talks about this a lot. This sort of idea, right? You can't actually control your results, but the only thing that you actually have in your control is what you do. And again, it's not just the volume of activity. I really do think that quality of activity is important, probably more important, right? So that includes, taking a step back and saying, okay, am I working on the right things? Am I working on the most leveraged? These are the most leveraged activities I could have right now at this moment. Am I continuing to feed my brain with good stuff? It's not just me blindly going out there and knocking on doors. Am I actually really thinking through am I segmenting the market properly? Am I thinking about, which are my happiest customers and why are they happiest? And am I getting more of those happy customers who are more likely to be successful? Am I completely differentiated from my competition? So there's really nothing else like me. So it's that quality of activity is really important too. But you also have to actually do the activity. Like if I didn't send out that email at a time where probably most people would have been asleep, I would not have won that account if we didn't fly to Winnipeg in the middle of winter. Like it would not have happened, right? So you still need to actually get out there and do it, but it's not blind. It's actually deliberate activity, and ideally, you're also running experiments too. Let's try this X versus Y, this segment versus that segment, this message versus that message. The ability to learn is, I think, critical. So part of how we got our company from the brink of bankruptcy to being a profitable company and then a high growth profitable company was in having many frequent meetings. Short meetings. Our team might have met for only 10 minutes, but it's like, hey, okay, what did we learn today? What did you try? What worked? What didn't work? And then every now and again, there'd be a breakthrough. And then say, okay, how do we triple down on that breakthrough? And this process of constant learning, experimentation, iteration, that's how we did it. So I think that has a lot in common with this idea of getting better every day. It's getting better every day and also learning more every day, and doubling and tripling down on the occasional breakthrough that you get by having high quality of consistent activity.
You mentioned the activity and the quality and the action, things that we talk about very often here at No Quit Living. And the best plan with zero action is the same thing as the worst plan with no action. You got to go out and do it. So I really believe in what you said, and I appreciate your candor and being very open with us about how you went about it during those times. One thing you mentioned was feeding your brain. And I wanted to ask you, as a lot of our listeners are into personal development and looking to improve different areas of their lives, and I was curious if during this time you read something that stood out, or possibly recently you've read a book or something that you'd like to share with our listeners.
Yeah, I mean, I read a lot. I mean, maybe a little bit too much. I think lately, honestly, I've been doing too much stuff on social media, and I'm really resolving myself to do a lot less reading on social and more reading in books again. But that said, there can be a lot of good stuff there on social media too. But I do read for at least 2 hours a day. And as I said, I'm trying to read more stuff in books as opposed to articles. At the time, just going back to the story of how we got my last company, Eloqua, from brink of bankruptcy to profitable and then growing. One of the things that really inspired me, and I think there's a tremendous amount of wisdom in it, is from a guy named John Boyd. And he wrote about the OODA loop. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I've not.
Yeah, this is big time. So he was in the Marines, I believe. No, he wasn't Marines. He was actually in the Navy. He was a Navy fighter pilot, or Air Force fighter pilot. He's an Air Force fighter pilot, and back in the 50s, and he was the best. He was the top gun. Shot down the most enemy planes, and then after the Korean War, he was commissioned to figure out why were the American planes so much better than the Russian MiGs. At the time, the MiGs were faster, and they had better armaments on it than the American. I believe they were F-16s. And what he found out was the American planes were slightly more maneuverable, and the pilots were able to see around 360 degrees. Their heads were in a capsule as opposed to seeing just in front of you. So the maneuverability and the ability to observe better than the enemy was critical. And so he created a whole model of maneuverability that he coined the OODA loop, which stands for observe, orient, decide, and act. And what his theory is that if you could operate your OODA loop faster than the enemy, then you're going to win. So you need to observe, and think about this in an airplane dogfight, right? You got to observe where the other plane is. You've got to orient yourself. You've got to make a decision in a split second, and you've got to act. And you do that over and over and over again. And if you can turn that around faster than your enemy, then you're going to win. So then he applied this to the whole army. How does a whole army observe, orient, decide, and act faster than the competition? And if it could do it faster, then it was going to win. And so the essence of OODA is learning. And so I actually applied this theory to how we were going to first beat our very rich, competitor in Silicon Valley. And he said, that's how we're going to win. We're going to turn our OODA loop faster than they are, which is why we met every day in our war room for 10 minutes every day. What did we learn, right? What did we learn? How are we going to make decisions? So you can see what we're doing. We're observing what's going on in the market. We're making changes in orientation. We're making decisions, taking action. And then, if we're turning our loop literally every single day, and our enemy is turning their loop like every 2 months, they have no chance. They're dead. So anyway, super excited about this idea. There's lots of great stuff on the internet on this idea. I believe that it's under the heading is called maneuver theory or maneuver strategy is what it's called. And apparently it's become official doctrine in the U.S. Marines now. They actually took these ideas and it's really become quite official. So that honestly, these things could really change an entrepreneur's life if you adapt it. And I really do believe if you learn faster than your competition, as either an individual or as a company, then you've got a really good shot at winning.
I could not agree more. I'm definitely going to look into that. We'll put that in the show notes. The one thing I would say is not only for entrepreneurs, but in everyday areas of life, is if you are constantly looking at observing, looking at orienting, making a decision, and then acting, I think you could literally put that into context of family, parenting, relationships. So I think it's a awesome thing that you shared with us. So I wanted to ask you a question, Mark. If you could go back and give the 20-year-old version of yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
Do everything possible to master your understanding of people. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. And all those mistakes, maybe not all of them, a lot of them, are really due to my own weak understanding of what motivates people, and my shortcomings in terms of my ability to communicate effectively with people, to motivate and inspire them. I'm really focused on that now in terms of my personal journey. I'm really focused on understanding myself, developing more empathy for people, increasing my understanding of human beings and how they operate. And I'm really excited for the rest of my life to really focus on that, because I think that is what's most critical for me developing as a leader. Motivating my own people, my staff, but you're right, it extends to family too. In some ways, I think marriage and fatherhood is like it's like the ultimate in leadership. You can't. Well, I guess in theory you could swap out your spouse or kids, but bad idea, right? I mean, my wife is what I have, and my kids are what they are, and unlike in a business where you can change out the team, you can't change out the team. You've got to be the best you can be to lead those folks. So I think it was a great thing you mentioned. I actually never thought of the OODA loop in a context of family, but that is a fascinating idea. And now you've put that bug in my head. I'm going to be thinking about that for weeks.
That's my second goal, is to motivate and inspire listeners and to put that bug in your head. So I hopefully achieved at least one of those two so far today.
Yeah, I actually think that's a big idea. But look, in my 20s, frankly, I was overconfident. Maybe that overconfidence in some cases was good, because it would allow me to talk to prospective customers that maybe I had no business talking to. But overconfident, I think, didn't have a great enough appreciation for people, and I think it really cost me. I think it cost me several years essentially of great productivity out of my career, and so I wish I focused more on that, and I wish I heeded my grandfather's advice more. When I was 13 years old, my grandfather gave me a book, How to Make Friends and Influence People. I'm sure you heard of it. Many listeners have.
Great book.
It's an old book, right? Written in the 20s. But he gave it to me when I was 13, and he said, "Mark, I want you to read this every 3 months, because everything you need to know about succeeding in life is in this book." And of course, I'm 13 years old. I was much more interested in girls and God knows what. But I did read it a bit, and maybe every now and again, every year I'd pick it up and I'd flip through it and read some of it. Now I read it much more often, and again, see so much wisdom in it. But and that book is all about how do you get the most out of other people? How do you maximally relate to people, and so you get the best results? And honestly, so much of success in life is about that.
I could not agree more with that, and that is a great book. So I wanted to ask you one quick question. If you could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Wow. I wasn't expecting this one. I had dinner with anybody, dead or alive. Who would it be? It would probably be a great entrepreneur. If for somebody who's living, I'd be fascinated to have dinner with someone like Elon Musk to understand kind of his mental model on things and how he thinks of it. He actually went to the same university as I did. He went to Queen's University in Kingston, Canada, which is where I went. But unfortunately, we never overlapped. But I just think he's got such a different way of looking at the world as most people. And I think there's so much value in understanding mental models. I think our mental models are what makes us succeed or fail. It's actually how we started this conversation. You were saying, Mark, paraphrasing you, what was your mental model and how you got through such difficult times, right? And so my mental model was, hey, every day I'm getting better. My mental model was, every day if my activity is higher quality and I got more activity, I'm going to win. So that mental model is what helped me get through it, right? So mental models are huge. And that guy clearly has a different way of seeing things, than everyone else. So that'd be one. Charlie Munger, who's the great business associate of Warren Buffett, has written extensively about mental models. So before he dies, I would love, because he's an old man now, I'd love to talk to him about mental models and everything that he's learned. And there's been some great entrepreneurs in history who are no longer with us, but who changed entire industries. There's one that probably not many people have heard of. And his last name is McLean. I'm trying to remember his Malcolm McLean. Not very people have heard of him, but he's literally created $5 trillion of value for the world, and literally has changed the geography of the world. No one knows who he is. He is the inventor of the container. So that thing that's on it's like intermodal containers, the thing that you see on ships and trains and trucks. So he was a truck driver. This guy was a truck driver who thought it'd be a great idea if he could take whatever was off the back of his truck and be able to stick it on a ship or a train. And so he built that and designed that and built an entire shipping empire out of it. And so there are entire metropolises in the world, like Singapore, for example, that would be a shell of what they are today if it wasn't for the invention of the container. Anyway, fascinating guy. Even on his deathbed, he was still inventing new businesses, maybe for him to work on the afterlife. So I'd love to spend time with folks like that. Again, understand how they think and see if I could adapt their mental model so that I could also think better and build more interesting businesses.
It's interesting. You've touched on that a couple times. Is how people think and how different people think differently. And I think it goes back again to your point of just trying to be better every day. So because I want to be respectful of your time, I wanted to ask you, Mark, if you're working on anything exciting or if anything's coming out you'd like to share with our listeners quickly.
Yeah, well, I am working on something exciting. So the company I'm working on now is it's called Influitive. That's like intuitive, but with a fl in the middle. And Influitive is all about, I think, is the biggest idea in marketing today, which is that the future is going to belong to companies who use their customers to do all their sales and marketing for them, instead of bombarding people with marketing messages and annoying salespeople and that sort of thing. So we're dedicated to this idea. We built a piece of software called the Advocate Hub that companies use in order to mobilize their happy customers to do more of the sales and marketing for them. So getting referrals and references and videos and that sort of thing. It's really taking off. I got 125 employees now and some amazing customers all over the world. And I think this is the biggest idea in marketing. And so if there's anybody out there, business owners and that sort of thing, who are thinking, well, what's big and what's next, and how do I reach my customers in this noisy world, in this expensive world? Well, if you have happy customers, if you've done that, if you've built an amazing product or service and you've got delighted customers, then we've got an approach to take those customers to generate revenue for you. So that is currently what I'm working on, and I'm very excited about it. I think it's going to be big. So we would appreciate people who are interested to go and take a look.
So last question, and I promise it's an easy one. What's the best way for our listeners to follow you or to connect with you?
Sure. Yeah. So on Twitter, I'm Mark Organ, all one word, MarkOrgan. So you can follow me that way. You can also follow me on LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn's got a follow feature now, which is pretty cool. And I do post regularly, probably too much, but I love to post exciting things that I read. So I post at least 2 or 3 times a day. So that's another way to do it. You could try email. I get a lot of them, but I'm mark@influitive.com, and people can reach me that way. But no guarantees on getting back. I get way too many emails. But connection on LinkedIn, direct message on Twitter, those are pretty effective.
Well, listen, Mark, I truly thank you for not only your time, but also your insight. And you've really opened up my mind to a couple different things, and especially wanted to thank you for the OODA. That will definitely be in our show notes as well.
Thanks. Well, I really enjoyed it. It was a great questions. It was a super fun interview, and thanks a lot.
Thank you. Look forward to talking to you soon. To sum up today's episode and our theme of the day, self-improvement, Mark discussed his personal story about perseverance and how mentally he attacked each and every day. Not only did Mark encounter some huge obstacles within his business, but he was almost forced to file for bankruptcy 4 different times. I asked Mark what his mindset was during those tough times, and he was very clear that he had his employees, his family, and many important advisors that were there for him. Through persistency and incredible hard work, determination, and commitment, Mark fought through and ended up selling his company to Oracle for almost $1 billion. As impressive as that number is, what I'm most impressed with was the fact that Mark was able to fight through 4 potential bankruptcies and attack each and every day with the right positive approach and mindset. Mark also referenced trying to get better every single day and being better than you were yesterday. He also spoke about the importance of activity, deliberate activity, and evaluation. He was very clear that you can't always control your results, but you can always control both your activity as well as your actions. Today's call to action is very specific and deliberate. I challenge and ask our listeners to take a look in the mirror. Although we can't control the outcome, we can control both our activity as well as our actions. So when you look in the accountability mirror, ask yourself, what can and what should you do today? If you answer that question honestly and take deliberate action and activity, you will be one step closer to success and one step closer to your greatness. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.